Did you know that over 30 books were almost included in the Bible, but were ultimately left out? These are ancient texts that were once considered for the Bible, but were ultimately left out. But why? What secrets do these books hold that made them so controversial? Some of these texts contain stories, teachings, and events that you won't find in the Bible as we know it today. So, are these books still around? And can we actually read them? In this video, we're going to uncover the mystery behind these lost books, why they were banned, and what secrets they may reveal about early Christianity. Let's start by diving into what these lost books of the Bible really are. You might be surprised to learn that many of these texts were once considered just as important as the ones we read today. To understand the lost books of the Bible, it's important to first consider the nature of the Bible itself. The Bible, as we know it today, is a collection of sacred writings that Christians and Jews believe to be divinely inspired. However, the Bible we read now has evolved over centuries. Early church leaders and religious scholars debated extensively over which texts should be included in the canon and which should be excluded. The books that were left out, often due to theological disagreements or lack of widespread acceptance, are referred to as the lost books of the Bible. These lost books are ancient writings that were once considered important by early Christians and Jewish groups, but were eventually excluded from the final version of the Bible. Some of these books were found in old scrolls or hidden libraries and contain stories, teachings, and events that didn't make it into the books we read today. You might be asking, why were these books left out? There are different reasons, and much of it depends on what church leaders believed was important for the faith. For example, the Gnostic Gospels, which were discovered in the 1940s, contain stories about Jesus and his disciples, but they differ from the teachings in the New Testament. Some leaders didn't think these books were consistent with the main Christian beliefs, so they chose not to include them. Others believe that some books were just too controversial or conflicted with traditional teachings. One well-known lost text is the Book of Enoch, which talks about angels and their interaction with humans. This book was popular in the early years of Christianity, but was not included in the Bible because some people thought it was too strange and didn't fit the main teachings. Another example is the Gospel of Thomas, which contains sayings of Jesus but leaves out his crucifixion and resurrection, important parts of Christian belief. So, what happened to these books? Some of them were lost over time, while others were kept secret by religious groups. Even though they didn't make it into the Bible, many of these books are still available today. Some have been found in ancient manuscripts, and others are kept in museums or libraries. Books like the Gospel of Mary, the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, and the Acts of Paul are all part of the lost collection that some people still read and study. While these books didn't make it into the Bible, they are still very important to historians and people interested in early Christianity. They give us a glimpse into the different beliefs and ideas that were around during the early years of Christianity, and show us how the Bible was shaped by the decisions of church leaders. Now that we know what the lost books of the Bible are, let's take a closer look at why these books were left out in the first place. Why did church leaders decide that these texts shouldn't be included in the Bible we read today? The reasons might surprise you. When the Bible was being put together many years ago, church leaders had to choose which books would be included. These leaders, many of whom were bishops and priests, were trying to decide which writings best reflected the core beliefs of Christianity. The main goal was to create a collection of texts that showed the life, teachings, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. But not all early Christian writings fit into this plan. Some of the lost books of the Bible were very different from what was included in the Bible we know today. For example, some books, like the Gnostic Gospels, contain ideas and stories about Jesus that didn't line up with the mainstream Christian teachings of that time. These books were written by a group of early Christians who had very different ideas about who Jesus was. The Gnostics believed that spiritual knowledge was the most important thing, rather than faith in Jesus' sacrifice and resurrection, which was central to most Christian teachings. Other texts, like the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, focused on stories about Jesus as a child, but didn't have much to say about his life as an adult or his mission to save humanity. For church leaders, this was a big problem. They wanted the Bible to focus on the important events in Jesus' life, like his death on the cross and his resurrection, which were the foundation of Christian faith. Some of these books were also too controversial. For example, the Gospel of Mary suggests that Mary Magdalene, a woman who was close to Jesus, had an important role in spreading his teachings. This went against the beliefs of the time, where men held most of the authority in the church. Leaders didn't want to include teachings that might cause confusion or disagreement within the church. Another reason these books were left out was because of time and tradition. The church was trying to create a Bible that was unified and easy to understand. They didn't want to include books that would make it harder to explain their core message. Over time, some of the texts just disappeared, while others were kept in secret or hidden away. Some of the lost books were even destroyed by people who didn't want them to be read. The final decision about which books would be included in the Bible was made over several centuries. Church leaders looked at many factors, such as whether a book was widely accepted, whether it fit the teachings of Jesus, and whether it was consistent with other accepted scriptures. The books that didn't meet these standards were left out. So, why do these lost books matter today? Even though they didn't make it into the Bible, these books still give us a glimpse into early Christian thought and the diverse beliefs that existed in the early days of Christianity. They show us that Christianity wasn't as unified as it is today, and that many ideas about Jesus and his teachings were still being debated. Now that we know about the lost books of the Bible, let's dive into who decided which books would actually make it into the Bible. The process wasn't as simple as we might think. It was long and filled with debates. In fact, many early Christians disagreed on which books should be included and which should be left out. So, how did this happen? The Bible we read today wasn't put together all at once. It came from centuries of discussions and decisions by church leaders. These leaders were mostly bishops and theologians who tried to decide which books accurately represented the teachings of Jesus Christ and the apostles. At the start, there were many early Christian writings floating around, each offering different stories, teachings, and messages. Some were accepted widely, but others were seen as inconsistent or even heretical, meaning they went against the core beliefs of Christianity. The early Christian church needed to decide which of these books were truly inspired by God and which weren't. This led to the creation of what we call the biblical canon, the list of books that are considered authoritative and sacred. This decision-making process wasn't quick. In fact, it took several hundred years. The first major council that helped decide the New Testament canon was the Council of Hippo in 393 AD, but the final list of books wasn't agreed upon until the Council of Trent in the 1500s for the Catholic Church. The Protestant Bible, on the other hand, had some different choices, and their canon wasn't fully settled until the 16th century as well. So, what did church leaders look for when choosing which books made it into the Bible? The primary criterion was whether the book was authentic, meaning it was believed to have been written by someone who was an eyewitness to the events or a close follower of those who were. They also wanted to make sure the book was consistent with the core teachings of Christianity, particularly the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Any text that didn't fit these standards was often rejected. One of the most controversial issues was the question of authority. Early church leaders had to ask, was this text inspired by the Holy Spirit? Did it hold the same spiritual weight as other writings already accepted by the community? And, crucially, did it align with the oral tradition of Jesus' teachings that were passed down by his apostles? The Gnostic Gospels, such as the Gospel of Thomas or the Gospel of Mary, were some of the writings rejected because they didn't fit the core Christian message about Jesus. These books sometimes presented a different version of Jesus' teachings or included ideas that church leaders thought might cause division. For example, the Gospel of Thomas focuses more on sayings and teachings attributed to Jesus, rather than the life events that were central to the gospel message. Because it lacked a clear connection to Jesus' death and resurrection, it was excluded from the Bible. Over time, there were also disagreements over the Old Testament texts. Different Christian groups had different versions of the Old Testament, leading to further debates. For instance, the Catholic Church includes books like Tobit and Maccabees in their Bible, but these are not included in the Protestant version. The decision to accept or reject books was not only about theological concerns, but also about church unity. Leaders wanted a set of scriptures that would unite Christians, not divide them. That's why certain books were accepted, while others were pushed aside. The idea was to preserve the integrity of the Christian message, keeping the teachings consistent and focused on what was considered essential for salvation. Many of the lost books of the Bible weren't just left out of the Bible, they also had a lasting impact on early Christian beliefs. One of the most notable impacts comes from the Gnostic Gospels, such as the Gospel of Thomas or the Gospel of Mary. These writings offer a very different view of Jesus' teachings than what is found in the New Testament. For example, the Gospel of Thomas focuses on sayings of Jesus, many of which are not found in the Bible. It emphasizes the idea that knowledge, not faith, is the path to salvation. This idea of secret knowledge or hidden wisdom spread among early Christian groups, influencing some to believe that understanding deeper truths about God was just as important as faith in Jesus. While the Gnostic Gospels were eventually excluded from the Bible, their ideas didn't disappear. In fact, some of these concepts about spiritual knowledge and personal enlightenment continued to influence certain Christian mysticism movements over the centuries. Many early Christian thinkers wrestled with the idea of how to balance faith with knowledge, something that can still be seen in the mystical traditions within Christianity today. Another major influence came from the Gospel of Mary, which gives Mary Magdalene a prominent role as a teacher and leader in the early church. This gospel portrays Mary as someone who has a deep spiritual understanding of Jesus' teachings. It challenges the idea that men were the only true leaders in the church and shows that women were active participants in spreading the message of Jesus. Even though the Gospel of Mary was not included in the Bible, it sparked important conversations about the role of women in early Christianity, ideas that are still being discussed today. There's also the Book of Enoch, an ancient text that describes the fall of the angels and their interactions with humans. It gives details about the Watchers, angels who came to earth and taught humans forbidden knowledge. The Book of Enoch was influential in shaping early Christian ideas about angels, demons, and the spiritual battle between good and evil. Though it was not included in the official Bible, parts of the Book of Enoch were quoted in other books of the Bible, like Jude. The imagery and teachings about the fallen angels continue to affect how many Christians understand the forces of good and evil. These lost books, even if they were never fully accepted, shaped early Christianity in important ways. They introduced new ideas about salvation, the role of women, angels, and the afterlife. These discussions and teachings helped form the foundation for Christian thought, even if they weren't included in the final version of the Bible. So, the lost books of the Bible might not be part of the official scripture, but they influenced the development of Christian theology and sparked debates and ideas that continue to shape Christianity today. These books remind us that early Christianity was full of diverse beliefs and ideas, all contributing to the rich tapestry of Christian history. And that brings us to the end of our exploration of the lost books of the Bible. From the secret teachings to their lasting impact on Christianity, these ancient texts have given us a unique glimpse into the diversity of early Christian beliefs. While they were excluded from the Bible, their influence continues to shape how many people understand faith, salvation, and even the role of women in Christianity. If you found this video insightful and want to dive deeper into religious history and mysterious teachings, Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. There's always more to uncover, and I can't wait to share the next chapter with you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.